Hello, BookTube. The end of July is upon us, so people are making their August TBRs all over BookTube. And I always like to do the same thing on this channel, although not a strict TBR in the usual sense, because I've read most of the books that I'm going to read in August, aside from the occasional straggler here and there. So what I want to do instead, what I tend to do in these look-ahead videos, is a TBR BY, to be read by you. And in this particular case, I had a chance to do more than one, because I did a video for the Christian Science Monitor's Facebook group, Bookspeed, on a handful of books to look forward to in August. That video it's doing well, but boy, did it go by like a flash. I had no idea how short a time it seemed. And despite the fact that the summer is often considered by some people who really don't look into it very closely as a doldrums for publishing, there's plenty more August books to talk about. And I told you all ahead of time that if the three options, out of the three options for what I would talk about on the Bookspeed group, if the August releases won out, I made a promise that I would do a separate August release video here on this channel that wouldn't include the same books. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got a list here of a few August releases that probably you've heard me mention on this channel before. That's the thing about this channel, is that we see advance copies well down the line. And then, since I never shut up about books, I have occasion in the intervening weeks or months to talk about those books long before they're released. So some of these you will definitely have heard me enthuse about before. The first one is Attention by Joshua Cohen. The novelist, Joshua Cohen, has a big, very meaty book out called Attention, which is basically a collection of essays and ruminations that wander and preen and pirouette in ways that would ordinarily drive me right up the proverbial wall, but this author's fantastic. He's just fantastic. I might not like some of his more telegraphed gimmicks in his fiction, but I recently reread his little novel Moving Kings, and after that I've just thrown in with this guy. He's brilliant. He's brilliant, and he's brilliant in less polarizing ways than Jonathan Safran Foer, for instance, who I think is equally brilliant. But try saying that in a literary crowd, see what happens. Everyone will mention Here I Am, which I thought was a stunning success, despite a massive plot flaw. But in this book, this is Joshua Cohen just sort of riffing, in short or at length, on various nonfiction subjects. It's takes an amazing amount of what the chosen people refer to as chutzpah to put out a book like this when you're barely old enough to shave, but it worked. It's tremendously good. If you're in the mood to wander around a miscellaneous collection of really smart essays and nonfiction ruminations, you might see it. It'll probably be in bookstores, and it is that sort of thing. You will love it. Then the next one is a huge undertaking, but what would a TBR BY of mine be without a huge undertaking? I realize we're heading into August. Here in America, that used to be referred to as the dog days of summer, meaning it was a reference to the dog star, but the meaning was that in August the heat just sort of settles. There's no ups and downs, no cool of the evening, no nothing like that. In August, the heat is just brutal. That's what it used to mean. It can't mean that anymore, because most of the United States is baking and burning, actually on fire. And most of the rest of the world is experiencing, everywhere from Japan to Poland, experiencing record-breaking hot temperatures. So we can't really talk about the dog days of summer anymore. The dog days will be all the time. But nevertheless, even though it's August, I am still going to recommend a massive book, and not only a massive book, but a massively complex book. It's something you've heard me praise on this channel before. It's Crashed by the great historian Adam Tooze, who writes about the 2008 financial collapse of the world economy, and all the subsequent aftershocks and after tremors and warning signs. It's an extremely disturbing book. He breaks down all the numbers. Those of you who know his work will know that this is an author who's very comfortable with statistical analysis, with actuarial charts, with all that sort of stuff. But also someone who's able to make you involved in that material. If you can get that sort of stuff past me, you can get it by anybody. So Crashed is amazing. It's sobering because if you're like me, you'll finish the book 100% certain that we're doomed. But I didn't bother to collect all of these books to haul them up on camera, and nothing else will work. If I try to show you visuals on my phone will stop working. If I try to show you visuals on my iPad will stop working. So, and I do not. YouTube does not offer an ordinary, as far as I can tell, an ordinary, completely simple way of simply adding pictures or text. I'm not talking about special effects. I'm talking about the simplest thing in the world: adding a picture, adding a word or two of text. Since, as far as I can tell, YouTube doesn't allow me to do that on their basic setup, I have never mastered anything else to do. So I don't have any pictures to show you, but I will annotate all these things down below. And I really recommend the new Adam Tooze. Tooze is not an easy historian to read. He doesn't really slow down for you, so it's an undertaking, like I said, but well worth it. Now, the next one is also history, but not an undertaking. It will sweep you along. And we've seen it on this channel before. It's Viking Wars by Max Adams. All about the Viking era. This amazing, discreetly bordered time period in which these weird, unstoppable supermen swept down onto the world out of the north. And at first they came in tentative raiding parties, just to a few places along the coast. Then they came in greater numbers and with greater confidence. Then they came and stayed. And this book is incredible. It's so much more. I think I mentioned on this channel before, it's so much more than what it needs to be. Simply telling the story of the Vikings will get you a book. That is a book. The Viking era is one of the few discrete eras in history that really is every bit as dramatic as it's billing. So you could just do that. But this is about much more than that. The author goes into great detail on who specifically was where, who specifically did what, how the ransacked and besieged populations felt about it all. It's just wonderful. This 2018, I don't know if I mentioned it on this channel or not. I know that I've mentioned that I have a deep fascination with the Viking era. But I don't know if I mentioned that 2018 is, oddly enough, a weirdly good year for Viking books. There are about 10 from major or minor publishers that I've read about 8 of those 10, and they've all been great. So this one, it's bigger than all the others, and I highly recommend it if you are interested in the Vikings. Then the next one is a memoir, but it's an enhanced memoir. It's Bitwise by David Auerbach, and it's a memoir of his life with computer code, with algorithms, starting right at the beginning. His life with algorithms, with advanced algorithms of a non-military nature, in other words, stuff that's out in the world, is the life of those things. He started right as they were starting and just grew up with them, and has stayed involved in the world of coding and algorithms ever since. And so that would be a fascinating memoir on its own. There have been a few of those. But this is so much more than that. This author really digs deep on the subject of what these things have meant in each of their iterations, and on the subject of what they mean now. I loved it. I am fascinated with algorithms. Last year I read a few good books on them that just terrified me about what they can and cannot do. Basically, they run the world, and only are going to do more so as time goes on, because the more complex computers get, the more only computers can tell them what to do. Bitwise is amazing. If someone can, again, it's the same thing as with Crashed. If somebody can write a long, fairly detailed memoir about computer coding and keep me on board, then they're doing a fine job. Now, the next one is The Tangled Tree by David Quammen. David Quammen is a great science naturalist, a great science writer. I recommend everything that he's written, from Natural Acts all the way up to the present day. His writing is amazing. The way he writes about science, he does it better than anyone in the world. It's amazing. And this latest one is a big, ambitious book about something that I mentioned on the Bookspeed podcast in connection with another book, which is our increasingly complicating way of looking at how evolution by means of natural selection actually happens. that the processes involved might be far more complex and also tangential than has been the typical model. And the Tangled Tree is just, it's in classic Quammen style. It ruminates all over, but boy, oh boy, it's one of those popular science books that you'll just come out of it having learned so much and having had a wonderful time doing it. I just strongly recommend it. Then the next one is a bit of an acquired taste. It's Frye Gaillard's book, A Hard Rain, and it's his history/memoir of the 1960s, but it's extremely acid washed. It's extremely impressionistic. So those of you who want, some of you actually over the years have asked me what's a really good history of the 1960s. This probably isn't the book that you had in mind when you were asking that question, but nevertheless, I mean, I read it the first time I read it, I mainly noticed its flaws. I mainly know what I thought were its flaws. I mainly noticed that it's not a typical narrative history. When I read it a second time, I realized how artful it is, how powerful it is, how emphatic it is. If you think of it more as an extremely historical memoir of the 1960s than an extremely memoirish history, you'll be fine, because it's a literary tour de force. It's not to be missed. It's just not. It's not what you automatically think when you read its description. So if you're interested in the 1960s, you should read it. Maybe borrow it from the library, just in case his stylistic experimentation doesn't really sit well with you. You wouldn't be on the hook for anything. Then the next one is YA, and it's classic YA. It's Rick Riordan. It's The Lightning Thief, the very first of the Percy Jackson adventures. But it's not just that. This is the one where I wish I had grabbed the book before I made the video. The publisher's coming out with a big, extensively illustrated hardcover of it, very much along the same lines as the illustrated Harry Potters that are coming out. With the illustrations are by John Rocco, and he does spot illustrations on lots and lots of pages, and also full page color illustrations, and they really add a lot to the story. I kind of sort of like the story anyway, but rereading it, I hadn't reread it at all since the first time I read it. Now rereading it in a big illustrated edition, I definitely enhanced the experience for me. I know that shouldn't be true, but it did. This is just such a lovingly made product. Then the next one is Jeremy Minot. It's a book from Oxford University Press called Birds in the Ancient World. That's exactly what you might think from that title. It's a history of how ancient sources, how ancient writers viewed birds. And it covers a gigantic array of those writers, and a gigantic array of the reasons why they would even think about birds, from incidental mentions or metaphorical ones in Homer to medicinal ones to also natural history, to ancient authors in ancient Greece and ancient Rome studied birds. Plenty of them had the same A to B to C string of thought that people have today, which is, I'm sitting out working in my garden, I see birds, they are fascinating, I watch them, I start to notice patterns in their behavior, I want to know why, I study them, I try to read about them. If I can't find what I want to read, then I write about them. And even if I can find what I want to read, I sometimes write about them. I write a book about birds. The ancients were the first ones to do that. And Minot he's an extremely enthusiastic reader of ancient sources. So he's not just ticking boxes as he goes along. Just delightful for the bird fan. Absolutely. Then the next one, I think I've praised it on this channel before. I'm going to praise it again. I'll probably also write a review, and I'll praise it again later on. It's by Anne Boyd Rioux, and it's Meg, Jo, Beth, Amy. It's a book about Little Women. It's about the composition of it, the long roots of it, and Louisa May Alcott's mind, and also its reception, and its long shadow that's cast over American literature. It's an amazing book. Just amazing. It's amazing. Whether you are a dyed-in-the-wool fan of Little Women or not, it's amazing. the author's sympathy and ability to pick and choose anecdotes and stories. I'm lost in admiration for it. I will certainly review it, but I wish that I could review it for a very big audience. And it's taken. I think, as far as I can tell, it's going to be very pleasingly widely reviewed. I think many people who started to read it realized right away, oh my God, this is a lightning bolt of a book. And that feeling just increases the more you read it. It sends you right back to Little Women, too. But I have a feeling that a lot of people did that, and so I think it's probably going to get reviewed in a lot of places. I'll review it in my own little patch. It doesn't really matter. And I can certainly recommend it to you, whether you love Little Women or not. The next one is Robert Jackson Bennett. It's the author of City of Stairs. Some of you will know him as the author of City of Stairs. And he has a new fantasy book called Foundryside, just coming out in August, that is almost taunting you with how derivative it looks just in description. A city that runs on magic. Magic is extremely commercialized. It's run by basically magical conglomerations. They hire a thief who is Lisbeth Salander from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. She is herself a living cliche of, the tough-talking but incredibly talented thief who can do any job and who wisecracks and who doesn't respect anybody and who is just aching to have meaning with a capital M enter her life and show her who she really is, and then you're expecting that from there she will be the chosen one and there'll be a written prophecy or something like that. By all accounts, that's what the book's plot sounds like when you're reading about it. And you can just imagine my reaction when I read all that stuff. And then I read the book, and it's a perfect reminder we all need, which is that you don't judge a book by its premise. You don't judge a book by its plot. You can sneer all you like, but read it, and you read it with an open mind, because the question always and only comes down to what the author can do with even the most familiar material. And oh boy, is this a good performance! It's not. There aren't many. I don't know. Are there any other fantasy novels on here aside from the Percy Jackson? Probably not. But oh boy, this is a good one. I don't get a lot of fantasy in advance, fantasy or science fiction, SFF in advance. So that particular genre could have some stragglers in August that I don't know about, but this one was terrific. And then the last one I want to recommend for now, we'll keep this video somewhat controlled in time. The last one I want to recommend for now is by Abby Howard, and it's for kids, but only ostensibly. This is one of those books that anybody could love. The best children's books, the best kids' books, as I'm sure you know better than I do, the best kids' books are that. The best kids' books are not just for kids. They don't talk down to their audience. They're just wonderful. So anybody can read them and love them. And this is called Earth Before Us. And the title, it's a series, Earth Before Us. The last one was Dinosaur Empire. This one is Ocean Renegades. And in it, a little girl, it's the same team as in the last book. A little girl who's she's got a wide open mind, and she's very smart. She's not all that sure she wants to be learning all the time. And she encounters a teacher who is a little bit on the loopy side. Let's just say her enthusiasm for teaching this young girl about the ancient life forms that have proliferated on Earth sometimes gets the better of her. So she's a bit on the enthusiastic side. And in this volume, they go back before the dinosaurs. They go back to the hundreds of millions of years in which they were long before the dinosaurs, in which ocean life was the life on Earth. And it's amazing. The Dinosaur Empire was amazing too, but at least it had the benefit of being marginally familiar to me. Since I'm a dinosaur fan, I knew basically the outlines of what we were talking about. But ancient sea life? No, I was dumbstruck on almost every page. And the artwork, it's an illustrated book. It's not, when I say kids book, it's not like a big flat picture book. It's sort of almost like a graphic novel. It's entirely artwork with the narration, but it's stunning. It's stunning how much you learn and how much fun you have doing it. So if you have a kid, who's into science, who's into dinosaurs or ancient life or whatever. You got to get both these books for them. They're going to love them. They're going to read them until they fall apart. But the thing is, the wonder of this book and the one before it is that you don't have to have that kid. You just have to be that kid. You'll just love it all the same. So there you go. That I will note all these down below. But that is just a very brief August 2018 TBR BY of stuff that I have read in the month of August that is just amazingly good. We're going to be talking about August releases throughout the whole month, so there'll be lots of other things that I will add, but I wanted to make those in a video, not just because I'm extremely enthusiastic about these books, but also because I promised. so I'll wrap this up for now, and we'll go back to other books. Thank you, BookTube.